So let's take a look at Downie's response to Sieghart's essay, this challenge to some fundamental points, the two fundamental points in Sieghart's essay. One, the professional's special duty to altruism, or to be altruistic. And two, the idea of the noble cause. Of course, an important point that Sieghart made was that there's a gross inequality of power between the professional and the client. What Downie points out rightly is that there's also a gross inequality of power between all sorts of other occupations and their customers. So that there's nothing unique in the professional relationship in that regard. And he points out right here in this paragraph here that, I'm sorry, can't seem to highlight anything. But in the second paragraph here on the first page, points out all sorts of other occupations in which that's true. Again, I think that is quite a valid point, but maybe a little bit unconvincing in that he points out things like travel agents and people who make underwear and things like that. Not the underwear things later. People who mow your lawn or mechanics working on your car. It doesn't take into account that medicine, law, the clergy, the military, and perhaps engineering work in areas of life which are more vital. But that's another argument. That's another subject. But he's quite right. I mean, there's gross inequality of power exists in all sorts of commercial relationships that aren't considered professions. So that would seemingly fail to define. It's perhaps a more commonly it is a more common phenomenon than Sieghart acknowledges. The second point is the idea of altruism. Sieghart says that altruism follows from the professional relationship. And Downie attacks this on different levels here at the top of the second column. He points out that it's not clear what sort of claim that Sieghart is actually making. He says, is it an empirical, a conceptual, or a moral claim? I'm going to ignore the conceptual part of it here and just concentrate on empirical and moral. The empirical claim, if one were to make the altruism of professionals an empirical claim, it would be the claim that professionals in fact do in our experience, act more altruistically than other occupations, and that would simply be false. The moral claim is that even if they don't, they should. The empirical claim is about how people actually do behave. The moral claim is about how people actually should behave. And Downie's point, as I take it, is that everyone is obliged to act morally and to act altruistically, at least to the extent that they shouldn't take undue advantage of other people. As he says here at the bottom, if the point is thirdly that morally speaking, doctors and lawyers ought not to aim at self-interest in the form of exorbitant fees, then that is true, and equally, those in other occupations ought not to aim at self-interest in the form of undue profits, which is to say that kind of undermines the whole distinction between the professions and business in general. That the professional is under no stronger obligation to avoid selfishness than the business person is. As he says, in other words, there is nothing to distinguish the professional from other occupations in terms of the criteria of self-interest and altruism. The moral point is simply the one on which we can all unite. We ought not to be unduly self-interested. This would get us into some interesting things about the difference between taking undue advantage or not taking undue advantage of people and generally acting altruistically or acting in service. But Downie does not believe that Sighart has pointed out either in the altruism point anything that would be, as he says, a distinguishing mark of the professional. But the second big idea, of course, is the noble cause. And what he points out is that that's just way too vague. That is not definitive, or that does not distinguish the professions from other occupations, because plenty of other occupations could claim to have a noble cause. Where does he say here? But the noble cause criterion will not serve this purpose, the purpose of actually defining the profession, not just because it is too vague to be of help, but also because it seems to apply much more generally than Mr. Sighart would welcome. For example, the farmer could be said to serve the noble cause of sustaining life, and the manufacturer or retailer of undergarments could be said to serve the noble cause of ministering to our comfort. That's a little bit mean on Downie's part. And the travel agent, the noble cause of self-development, et cetera, et cetera. The solution may be to drop the idea of noble cause, right? Because it doesn't really say anything. Again, I think that Sighart does have kind of a response to that, and we'll look at it in his response to Downie's response.